Welcome, friend, to Life and Liberty Radio. I'm David Householder, here to encourage your pursuit of happiness. You and I are partners, exploring our shared spiritual journeys. Together, we're dreaming and working for a free society. Tell others today about our adventure in faith and freedom. So breathe in, open your mind, lift up your spirit. Let's get started. Today we're going to talk about labels, especially political labels, and how useless they have become. We're going to look at liberal, conservative, progressive, Democrat, and Republican. Now, it turns out that our country's had a long history, several centuries now, and these words change meaning over time. And what used to be a progressive is now a conservative, and what used to be a liberal is now a statist. So let's unpack these words: liberal, conservative, progressive, Democrat, Republican. Let's look at liberal first. If someone says that he or she is a liberal, we think in terms of somebody who likes big government, somebody who likes progressive social values. They're probably for gay marriage and abortion rights and those kinds of things. And liberals started out as somebody who was for freedom. Do you see the tension? How can a liberal be for government control, more regulation? And now it's the liberals who want environmental controls and controls on banking and controls on Wall Street and controls on manufacturing and controls on everything. They want regulations on every little thing. So it used to be liberal was for somebody who wanted less government, and now it's for someone who wants more government. It still kind of works with the term liberal in terms of social values, not economic values, but social values, because I think that really hasn't changed much. People who kind of live and let live. And so liberal socially hasn't changed that much. Politically and economically, it's changed a ton. It's 180 degrees from what it used to be. In fact, the term liberal in Europe still means liberal. It still means that people believe in social freedom and economic freedom, which means they believe in very little state, very little government. And if you were to vote in Europe for a liberal party, in Germany you'd vote for the FDP, in Holland you'd vote for the VVV or VVV, and those would be the freedom parties. So they would be for letting people live however they want to live. You know, if they want to take drugs, they take drugs. However they live out their sexuality is their deal, but also keep the government out of our business. And they're for low taxes, very low taxes, and they're the pro-business party, whereas liberals here are the anti-business party. Go to a group of small business people, small business owners, and ask them, how many of you are liberals? Nobody in America. Whereas in Europe, they'd all say, of course we're all liberals. We're for less government and more free market. And it used to be that free market was associated with free social values, but now people who have free social values like lots of control in government. So it's shifted. Conservative. Let's look at the word conservative. We think of a conservative suit. We think of conservative ideas. And certainly socially, conservative ideas are people who want to conserve traditional values. And we think of conserving the traditional family values or traditional sexual values or traditional Christian values, Judeo-Christian mentality and the work ethic, all that kind of stuff. Now, that hasn't changed much. We're still conserving those things, those of us who are conservatives. But the truth is, most conservatives now, politically and economically, are no longer conservatives. They're the ones who are challenging the status quo. They're challenging the big government. They're challenging all of those things, and they want less spending, less regulation, all of those things. So it's a funny mix with people who want more regulation in the social sphere. They want a more traditional lifestyle, and yet they want less regulation in economics. which is not the way it used to be with a conservative. A conservative used to be keeping the status quo and having social values that are conservative. So it's really fascinating because now the Democrats are really the ones who are pro-establishment, pro-Washington, pro-government. So liberal has changed, conservative has changed, progressive. Used to be that progressive was something shared by both Republicans and Democrats. Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive, and we had Woodrow Wilson, who was a progressive. And progressive was seen as someone who wants to move forward. Don't keep looking back at the past and the values of the past. Let's move forward. Progress. Well, progressive really sounds kind of nice. Well, I'm kind of just a little bit more progressive on that. It makes you sound kind of chic. You're going to wear a beret or something, and you're going to hang around and wear tweed and talk about old books. But progressive really is come to mean I want big government. And that's what Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson gave us. Big government, way bigger than before. Very soon I'm going to do a show on Woodrow Wilson and why I think he's the worst president ever. And the second worst might just be Teddy Roosevelt, because they increased the size of government's intervention in our lives, which is diametrically opposed to the Founding Fathers. Now, where the label progressive really fits is when people think about the Constitution. People like myself believe that the Constitution should be taken as is, that it stood the test of time. It's the finest document ever put together in the human race when it comes to anywhere in the human race, in all of history, when it comes to how we organize our life together. There's never been anything like it. We've had peaceful transitions of power since 1789 because of the Constitution. That is a phenomenal success. Why mess with that? Why mess with that? Let's advance our cell phones. Let's advance our cars. Let's advance other things. But let's keep this working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I learned that early on in life. And progressives think, they didn't fully understand back in those days the challenges we'd be facing. We can't take the Constitution real seriously. What we have to do is we have to think progressively. Take all that old stuff with a grain of salt. Let's move forward, which I think is really foolish. We want to think ahead, but we always want to bring forward the wisdom of the past, because the truth is, the past outnumbers us. There's a lot more of them than there are of us in the present, and people have had a chance to think for a long time, and those things that stand the test of time we want to keep doing.
For the trend lines behind the headlines, listen daily to The Bottom Line on KBRT in Los Angeles, KCBC in San Francisco, KBRT740.com, worldwide live streaming, California's voice for life and liberty.
We've had liberal, progressive, conservative. How about Democrat? Well, Jefferson really started the Democratic Party, more or less, and the Democratic Party was the party that had its base in the South. Well, of course, we don't have that anymore because they were the party that was pro-slavery, and they were also the party that was pro-small government. Thomas Jefferson definitely didn't like big central government. I think it's hilarious that liberals today keep quoting Thomas Jefferson like they're darling or something, when Thomas Jefferson would throw a fit if he had to be with the Democratic Party today, because he's probably the most anti-statist person ever to become president of the United States. He did not trust central authority. He believed that the power should be at the local level. And Thomas Jefferson also wouldn't be real comfortable with the Democrats because he was the one, although not a real great churchgoer type of guy, certainly not orthodox in his theology, Thomas Jefferson insisted on our rights coming out of the Creator's plan, not majority vote. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. He believed that if people gave people rights, not the Creator, people could take them away. And he was right. You can't run a 12-step group without a higher power, and you can't run a country either. The whole idea that just a majority of people can vote for something and it's true, it's just not true. We have to ground it in something deeper. And the Democrats now are the secular party, the anti-spiritual party, where the Founding Fathers, although they believed in no state religion, believed in a state worldview. And that state worldview was basic Judeo-Christian theism. There was not one atheist among the Founding Fathers, no matter where they were theologically. So there we have the Democrats, which have changed a lot, of course, because now the Democrats are full of African American members. In fact, almost all African American voters are Democrats, 85, 90%, where it used to be the party that was pro-slavery and anti-Lincoln, and used to be the party that was insisting on grounding our rights in a creator, and now they're the party that wants to secularize everything. So it's fascinating how that happens. And then we look at Republicans. So liberal, conservative, progressive, Democrat, Republican. Republicans, the party of Lincoln, the party of abolition of slavery, the party that was super progressive in the 1860s, wanted to change the whole social order, hardly conservative, and now most Republicans call themselves conservatives, whereas in 1860 you were a radical if you were a Republican, because you wanted to get rid of slavery, which half of the country depended on. And so you wanted to change everything. And also, it was the party that attracted African Americans after the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery in the United States. And so most African Americans, of course, became Republicans. And our first Congress representatives and our first senators who were African Americans were all Republicans, because that was the party of freedom from slavery. That was the party of Lincoln against the party of the Democrats, who wanted to keep slavery going. So the Republicans were always the small government pro-freedom party all the way through even the 20th century, up until right around the time of Johnson and Nixon. Because up until then, the war party was always the Democrats. Who brought us into World War I? Woodrow Wilson. Who brought us into World War II? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Who brought us into Korea? That would be Truman. Who brought us into Vietnam? That would be Kennedy and Johnson. All of the above are Democrats. Democrats would bring us into war. Why? Because Democrats, once they became progressives in the 20th century, believed in strong central government, and the way you get central government going is to go to war, because that centralizes power. And the Republicans were always the ones who said, let's not go to war that fast. America first. Let's defend the country. We don't need to be an empire. We don't need to go out there and do all these things, because we want to remain free people here. If we all had our own guns and just had a militia, we'd be fine, because we have no natural enemies here in the United States. The price of empire is terrorism, as Pat Buchanan so eloquently said, that if you have an empire, you're going to have terrorists, because people don't want to be told what to do by someone from a long ways away. So basically, if we were to stop being an empire, we would stop terrorism. And Republicans, up until Nixon, were the anti-war party. All of a sudden, with Nixon, there was a shift, and we became the party that wanted more imperial wars. And certainly with the Bush War Room, Republicans became the party of imperialism and war. And the Democrats were the party of peace and George McGovern, and let's not be that. So there's a big shift. In other words, to sum up, there have been lots of flip-flops with all kinds of parties and points of view in the United States. Liberal doesn't mean what it used to mean. Conservative doesn't mean what it used to mean. Progressive doesn't mean what it used to mean. Democrat doesn't mean what it used to mean. And Republican doesn't mean what it used to mean. So all of these things are in flux. And the moral of this story is, keep your head on straight and continue to hold for those values that you know are true. And don't be caught up in any movement that tells you exactly how to think. Because that movement, the truth is, a couple of generations ago,